Imagine having absolute power and still making the worst possible decision. That was Pharaoh. At this point in history, Egypt was not just doing well, Egypt was winning. The economy was strong, the army was unmatched, the infrastructure was impressive enough to make future civilizations feel slightly embarrassed. Everything worked, everything obeyed, everything moved when Pharaoh said so, and Pharaoh knew it. He wasn't just a king, he was the system. People didn't argue with him. They didn't question him. They didn't even finish their sentences around him unless invited. When you live long enough without resistance, you start believing resistance no longer exists. That belief is dangerous. From Pharaoh's perspective, nothing was broken. The kingdom ran smoothly. Labor was cheap. Construction was constant. Order was absolute. If there was a problem somewhere, it was small enough to ignore. And if it wasn't small, it could always be controlled later. That was the mindset. When things go right for too long, risk stops looking like risk. It starts looking like confidence, and confidence left unchecked slowly turns into arrogance wearing a very convincing disguise. This is where the first mistake appears. Quietly, almost politely. A request comes in. Not dramatic, not aggressive, just a simple ask. Let the people go. From the outside, it doesn't look threatening. From Pharaoh's chair, it looks unnecessary. Why change anything when everything is working? Why respond seriously to something that doesn't feel urgent? Pharaoh does what powerful people often do in moments like this. He underestimates the problem. He treats it as temporary, manageable, something that can be delayed without consequence. After all, he's Pharaoh. He can always fix it later. This is the first silent error. Assuming time is neutral. Assuming delay has no cost. Assuming control means immunity from consequences. It's the same logic people use when they ignore a small warning light because the car still drives fine. The engine hasn't exploded yet, so it must be fine. Pharaoh isn't cruel in this moment. He's confident. He believes the situation is under control because everything else always has been. And when that belief sets in, warnings don't sound like warnings anymore. They sound like noise. So he ignores them. Not dramatically, not angrily, calmly, casually. Like someone closing a notification they plan to deal with later. And that's what makes this moment important. The first mistake isn't the refusal, it's the mindset behind it. The belief that power equals control, that authority cancels consequences, that being untouchable today means being safe tomorrow. Nothing collapses yet, nothing explodes. Life goes on, which only reinforces the illusion that the decision was right. But something has shifted. A door has opened, quietly. And behind it is something Pharaoh doesn't see coming yet, because the most dangerous mistakes never announce themselves loudly. They just wait, and this one has only just begun. Pharaoh doesn't say no because it makes sense. He says no because it hurts his pride to say anything else. The request comes again. Let the people go. It's still simple, still direct, still not a threat. But Pharaoh reacts as if someone just challenged him to an arm wrestling match in front of the entire palace staff. And Pharaoh does not lose arm wrestling matches, so he says no. Then he says no again, and again. Because when you're used to winning, repeating yourself feels like strategy, not stubbornness. From the outside, the whole situation looks very avoidable, but pride has a strange way of turning tiny decisions into grand battles that exist only inside someone's head. Pharaoh isn't protecting Egypt at this point. He's protecting his ego. And his ego has a full security team. Modern comparison? It's like refusing help with something clearly too heavy just to prove you don't need it, and then pulling a muscle in the process. Except Pharaoh isn't pulling muscles. He's pulling a kingdom into chaos. Every no makes things worse. Every refusal adds pressure. Every decision seals the next one. But Pharaoh doubles down anyway. Pride never retreats. It escalates. It inflates. It convinces you that consistency is more important than correctness. And now the situation shifts. It's no longer political. It's personal. Pharaoh isn't responding to the request anymore. He's responding to the idea of being challenged. And once he starts playing that game, the scoreboard stops caring about logic. This is the part where decisions start making less and less sense. Not because Pharaoh is confused, he's actually very certain. Too certain. So certain that backing down feels like defeat, even if surrender would save everyone a lot of trouble. He tells himself he must hold the line. He must not look weak. He must not lose control. But ironically, he loses control precisely because he refuses to lose control. Meanwhile, everything around him is shifting. Signs are appearing. Consequences are growing. The situation is clearly changing, just not in a way Pharaoh wants to acknowledge. But instead of stepping back, he steps harder. Instead of reconsidering, he reinforces. Instead of asking, "What's the cost?" he asks, "Who's questioning me?" This is where the tone of the story changes. Quiet pressure turns into active tension. A single no becomes a pattern becomes a rule, and a rule becomes a trap. Pharaoh isn't in control anymore. He just doesn't know it yet. What started as a simple decision has now become a personal mission, and personal missions have a dangerous habit of ignoring consequences. And here, stubbornness becomes the new strategy. The warnings begin, one after another, no subtlety, no ambiguity, just loud, clear signals that something is very, very wrong. And Pharaoh ignores them. At first, the signs are small enough for someone extremely confident to pretend they don't matter. But they get bigger, and louder, and harder to explain away. What started as gentle taps on the shoulder quickly becomes the narrative equivalent of someone shaking him and yelling, "Hey, this is serious." Yet every time a warning appears, Pharaoh treats it like an inconvenience. Another thing to brush aside, another temporary issue. Another problem for future Pharaoh, whoever that poor man might be. The costs rise with every refusal. Resources are strained, people are stressed, situations turn chaotic. It's like ignoring all the red lights on your car's dashboard because the car still moves. Sure, the engine is making a noise that sounds like a goat trapped inside a blender, but technically, it still drives, so why stop? Pharaoh applies that exact logic. And here comes the observational comedy. Pharaoh keeps promising change. Okay, fine, I'll adjust this time. Then he changes nothing. Every single time, it becomes a routine. Warning, panic, promise, calm, reversal, repeat. Egypt is basically stuck in a loop because the man in charge can't press the admit mistake button. But here's the real issue. The mistake is still fixable. Right now, in this moment. If Pharaoh wanted, he could stop everything from escalating. The story could take a completely different turn. The consequences could shrink instead of grow, but he doesn't do it. Because admitting he miscalculated feels worse than continuing the miscalculation. Pride is expensive, but Pharaoh is paying in installments without checking the interest rate, and the walls start closing in. The power that once protected him now becomes the cage he can't escape. He has to maintain the image, the control, the posture, the "I know what I'm doing" expression. But internally the situation is slipping. Quietly, gradually, disastrously. The warnings don't stop, the pressure doesn't ease, the stakes don't stay still. Everything escalates because Pharaoh refuses to. And then the tension shifts. The tone changes, the consequences stack too high to ignore. The moment is coming, the one decision that won't just be stubborn or unwise. It will be the decision that pushes everything past the point of return, because after enough ignored warnings, a choice appears that can't be undone. And that choice is next. Pharaoh finally gives in, too late. After all the warnings, all the tension, and all the "I've totally got this under control" energy, he releases the people. They leave. The pressure drops. Egypt gets a moment of quiet for the first time in a long time, and that quiet is suspiciously uncomfortable. Pharaoh sits there probably for about 2 minutes before the silence starts feeling like a personal attack. It's the kind of silence that makes someone rethink every decision they just made, like when a person finally sends that long overdue apology text and immediately wishes they hadn't, because it hits him. Wait, did I just lose? Did I actually give in? Is this what surrender feels like? It's like making the right decision after the damage is already done. Sure, it was technically correct, But it also reveals how long he resisted, how much he ignored, and how much the situation spiraled because of him. And Pharaoh does not like that realization, so he does the one thing that makes the least sense and the most noise. He changes his mind again. He decides to chase them, because if you can't undo the mistake, maybe you can outrun it, right? This becomes his final attempt at control. It's dramatic. It's unnecessary. It's the leadership equivalent of hitting undo on a decision that clearly cannot be undone. The army moves. The chariots roll out. The path ahead looks wide open, like the universe is giving Pharaoh one last confidence boost. For a brief moment, he feels powerful again. He feels right again. He feels like the story just snapped back into his hands. But that feeling lasts exactly as long as the distance between him and reality. Because here comes the ironic twist. The mistake was never about lacking power. Pharaoh had plenty of that, more than enough. The mistake was not knowing when to stop using it. Power can solve problems until it becomes the problem, and now he's too far in to turn back. The choice he made out of pride, fear, and regret has carried him into a situation that no amount of authority can reverse. The chase reaches its peak. The tension locks in place. The moment becomes irreversible. Pharaoh can no longer retreat. He can no longer rethink. He can no longer rebuild. Everything he delayed, ignored, and doubled down on has led him directly to this point, the point where consequences don't wait for explanation, and the final cost is about to arrive. Pharaoh made a fatal mistake because he confused authority with invincibility. That's the whole story in one sentence. But the path to that sentence is what makes the fall unforgettable. He had absolute power. He ignored every warning. He doubled down on pride. He acted too late. And in the end, he lost everything. It's not a complicated pattern, but it is a familiar one. Power creates confidence. Confidence creates blind spots. Blind spots create disasters. And the bigger the power, the bigger the disaster. Pharaoh thought authority meant immunity. That commands created reality. That consequences only existed for people outside the palace. Every refusal felt like strength. Every delay felt like strategy. Every warning felt optional. But that's the thing about authority. It magnifies the impact of every choice, good or bad. Quanto maior o poder, maior o impacto do erro. And insisting on the wrong thing can cost far more than stepping back ever would. In modern terms, it's like losing everything just to avoid admitting a mistake. People do this all the time, on smaller scales, thankfully. They hold on to the wrong argument, the wrong decision, the wrong belief, because surrender feels like weakness. But weakness isn't admitting you're wrong. Weakness is pretending you're right until the consequences make the decision for you. Pharaoh didn't fall because no one warned him. He fell because he believed he didn't need warnings. Confidence isn't a problem. Excess confidence is. And that's the uncomfortable part of the story. It's easy to shake our heads at Pharaoh's stubbornness until we realize how often people repeat the same pattern in their own lives. The scale changes, but the logic stays the same. Pharaoh's downfall teaches something simple and universal. Power is not protection. Control is not certainty. And refusing to reconsider is one of the fastest paths to collapse. The mistake wasn't saying no, it was never learning to say enough. Because at some point, refusing to stop becomes the thing that stops you. So the episode closes with a question, maybe the most uncomfortable one of all. Which human downfall should be explained next? Saul, Solomon, or Judas?